welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, and today we're getting into minutes 86 through 90 of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, which starts with Han sassing Leia, saying if we can just avoid any more female advice, we ought to be able to get out of here. And it ends with a kiss just for luck. That's how I'll say that. And today's guest is Dan Golding, an absolute legend, composer, writer, associate professor, and co-host of Art of the Score podcast, which a lot of listeners might know him from. Hello, Dan.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Chrysanthi. I really have loved discovering this podcast and listening to it. It's totally my level of detail about the Star Wars music. Star Wars is the score that got me into film music in general, probably film as well. So it's played a big role in my life, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking this few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm specifically excited to have you for these minutes because I've heard you speak a little bit about the cues that are in this couple of scenes, but I have so much, in what I have heard of you talking about this, I've just sensed that, you had so much more to say than you have been able to say in the time constraints. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect little block. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start listening to some of it to warm our ears up. So this is Obi-Wan turning things off.
Such a great sound effect as well.
I love that sound effect. It's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because this set of minutes with the sound design and even a few of the moments in the orchestra, they sound very almost like synthesizers.
Yeah. Well, I wonder whether actually that, could be an early synth, that woo sort of sounds to me a little bit like somebody just dropping the pitch on a Moog or some kind of early synth. But yeah, I don't know. I really love the music in this section. It's a if you played it in isolation, I don't know that many people would pick it, unless of course they're huge Star Wars nerds like us. I don't think they would pick it as being Star Wars because it doesn't really have a lot of the hallmarks of the Star Wars sound. The strings are really quite thin. There's barely any vibrato on the strings. I think you're the string player, not me, so you can probably tell me a little bit more about what they're doing. But
yeah. Well, what I'm hearing there is you're right. I'm not hearing a lot of vibrato, which is when, I'll just play. It's So if I were to use vibrato, I would be literally shaking my finger to kind of, the pitch would oscillate a little bit. And the kind of standard way that violinists, string players play, if not marked, would be with vibrato. It's just a natural thing that is, a stylistic. Yeah, it's just it's the baseline. So to the point that in scores, if there's to be no vibrato, it would be written in no vibrato or, little vibrato. So here it's it's a much flatter tone, not flat in pitch, but and I think there's doubling maybe with some, because I hear some tremolo maybe a little bit too.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure.
I think you're right. And the ultimate effect to me is that this is one of the very few moments in the score where John Williams's music sounds like one of his mentor figures, Bernard Herrmann. I think if you played this, you would go, oh, that kind of sounds maybe a little bit like a suspense scene in Psycho or Vertigo or something like that, and a couple of people have really pointed out that actually, Psycho was one of the first times in sort of orchestral history, for hundreds of years where the string players were asked for the whole time to not play with vibrato. And so, that's always what,
interesting.
yeah, of course, these days, especially in horror and stuff like that, it's quite common. But Herman was a mentor figure for Williams. Williams actually wrote one of Hitchcock's late films, Family Plot, which is a very strange film, and I don't think it's particularly on either Williams or Hitchcock's highlight reel, but it's nice that they did have that collaboration. But to the degree where Williams felt compelled to call Bernard Herrmann and ask if he was okay with him writing the music for Hitchcock, because Hitchcock and Herrmann had a really acrimonious end to their relationship. So, I think Williams's father played percussion for Herrmann. So yeah, there's this little link there, and I think the idea is that part of arriving on the Death Star was temped with Psycho when the Millennium Falcon arrives, because there's the same three notes that's the Madhouse motif from Psycho, the da da da. But anyway, sorry, this is a very long digression. For all of this is to say, I think it's the one of the few moments in the score where the strings sound like Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah, I get that vibe. It's definitely, it's very in line with the Death Star, because the Death Star in general has such sparse music, if any at all. And it's one of those things where the sound design really shines on the Death Star.
Yeah, that's true. I also really love, I think it's vibraphone that sort of punctuates just the dum dum. Yeah, almost like, with the higher strings, you'd be tempted as a composer, I'm sure, to have that be like pizzicato, double bass or cello or something like that. It's a real percussive sort of clunk clunk sort of sound, but I think it's vibraphone.
The vibraphone is used really interestingly in this. We're going to talk about the vibraphone, I hope.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But it's such an interesting choice, and again, not an instrument that you go, "Oh, Star Wars."
Yeah, especially some of the doublings that it has later, which I think are very fascinating. This is such a contrast to what we're about to get, and so I'll just keep playing.
We can just avoid any more female advice. We got to be able to get out of here. Well, let's get moving. Where are you going?
No, wait till here!
Come here, you big coward. Chewie, come here.
Listen, I don't know who you are or where you came from, but from now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me.
So wonder you're still alive. Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
No reward is worth this.
So there the music is kind of kicking up a notch, but it's pretty discordant.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, can I also say this is on reflection, like surely Han Solo's worst scene. Like this is the scene where you're like, really? Come on, man. You're like, just it's really frustrating. But it's gold because it allows Princess Leia to really define herself against him, and for you to, it's really the first scene where they've met where they're not in imminent risk of dying, so they get to finally have a conversation, and their conversation is basically like, equal parts, who are you, how dare you, and anyway, but the music, I think, is really reflecting that, because you get, on the one hand, this really, yeah, as you said, discordant little, I don't think you could call it a melody line, but like a lead line, right? That is like, it sort of feels like it's going nowhere. It's constantly shifting. I don't know.
It's certainly less
technically.
directional than some of the future lines that we're about to hear that are very like clear in their like functional harmony. Here it's very, the direction is not clear.
Yeah. Like the da, da, da. I can't even sing it. It's just, it's really kind of all over the place. It almost feels like, I don't know, like a 12-tone row or something, you know,
I was
like,
gonna say,
like,
it reminds you of like the sight singing like tests.
right. Yeah. 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 Something that's designed to really test your ear. Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got this little rhythm that punctuates it, just the dun 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 dun, and that stays more or less in the same sort of rhythm and the same sort of key. And so you've got these two parts that are really clashing. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, that's again, I really don't think this is the kind of thing that if you played it on its own, people would go, Star Wars. Like, it's really, you know, it's John Williams showing his versatility, and I think, you know, along with what we've heard for Ben shutting down the tractor beam, a versatility in the Star Wars sound that perhaps is really only present in the first film for Williams. I think, you know, from Empire, he really solidifies this is what Star Wars sounds like. But in this first film, he's kind of trying out a few things. I mean, you know, I was thinking just the other day, actually, I hosted a huge concert, which I was very, very, very lucky to do, of John Williams music, and they opened with the main title from Star Wars, as of course you must, and reflecting that, you know, John Williams never expected to hear Star Wars music again when he wrote it. Like, he thought that was it, recording it with the LSO, you know, that was going to be the end of it. But yet here we are, however many years, what is it, 40 something now? I can't do the maths quickly in my head, 45. And, you know, that in that moment was being played to like a crowd of 10,000 people, and here we are talking about it in detail. It's kind of funny. I really feel like for Empire, he was like, okay, now I've got to sit down and really nut out exactly what the Star Wars sound is. But here he was still trying a few things, and I think it's really cool and really interesting and surprising when you sit down to take it apart.
I especially feel it in the woodwinds for some reason, but I haven't gone through Empire yet in this much detail, so we'll see. We'll see how I feel later.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here, there's definitely a lot of that. I don't know if I would call it atonal, but something like that. There's certainly a lot of like dissonant, like big leaps that go past an octave. Like I'm thinking like minor ninths and stuff like that. So it's a little bit, yeah,
for sure. It's so, yeah. And, you know, as I said before, it's kind of Han's worst scene. I mean, I think the music is designed to really underscore the discordance at work and the kind of fractiousness. Yeah. And, you know, I was reflecting that this is one of my favorite elements, not necessarily my favorite scene, but one of my favorite elements of A New Hope is the fact that they are, you know, on the enemy base, which is a very common Star Wars trope. But what's not super common is that they're kind of arguing amongst themselves and idling and sort of going, okay, what's next, rather than constantly being imminent danger or constantly sneaking, constantly chasing or being chased. There are these moments where they're sort of like, okay, we're in the enemy base. Now what?
They're like hanging out for quite some time.
Yeah, hanging out in hidden territory, in enemy territory. It's yeah. I kind of feel like that's a lot more unique to this film and it
I
kind
think
of
you're
makes
right.
yeah, it makes it feel a little bit more episodic as well, I think.
Mm.
You know, like a lot of Star Wars throughout is like meanwhile, you know, these cuts between parallel storylines of like, meanwhile, here's what's happening with these other people you've probably forgotten about. And this film in particular is sort of cutting at this moment between the parallel storylines of Ben doing a lot more serious work, and Luke and Han, and now Leia and Chewie, of course, just sort of, I don't know, yeah, making it up. You know that line from Raiders of the Lost Ark that Indiana Jones has, that I don't know, I'm making it up as I'm going along. You know, that kind of great. That's a terrible Harrison Ford with my Australian accent as well, but you know, like that kind of improvisation that I think is so key to the mood of the first Star Wars film. It feels like a roller coaster, like you're really just being flung around, and you, who knows where you'll end up. And then you've got the droids as well, who are usually done with silence, I think, or at least no music for a lot of their meanwhile scenes.
The droids always get different music than whatever else is happening. So it's very clear just listening without even looking when the scene is switching or like when the perspective is shifting. We were talking in the last episode, we were doing the trash compactor scene, and that in itself was like a whole adventure within an adventure. And that's how a lot of this film feels like. It's been wild to go through it so slowly and realize how much hanging out there is like throughout the film.
Yeah.
Like it kind of, it moves. You see, it never feels like it moves slower than I remember plot wise, but it feels action packed every set of minutes. So yeah, it's very interesting.
And I think absolutely everything that I've read, I wasn't alive to see the film in 1977, but everything that I've read suggests that at the time, and all the other films that I've seen that are sort of contemporaneous to Star Wars, suggests that actually it felt lightning fast at the time.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, blockbusters have definitely sped up. But yeah, that one of the defining features of Star Wars in 77 was how quick it felt. Which, yeah, is really, really interesting to consider in these scenes, because this is when it's a little bit slower.
But emotionally, it's still moving, and I think that's why it feels quick to me, is because their relationships, like they're all strangers at the beginning of this film, and these little adventures within adventures escalate their friendship, or and so by now it's like, I don't know how, only 86 minutes in, we already feel like they're a crew, and they. There's stakes amongst each other. So
that's exactly right.
So good.
Yep.
So we'll continue listening. This is back to Ben. Some nice beeps.
Give me regular reports, please. Right. Do you know what's going on? Maybe it's another drill. That new BT-16? Yeah,
it's kind of funny. Ben in his robe.
Yeah.
What was that? That's nothing. Outgassing. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I love that part.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like in the middle of everything, here's the Force. Yeah. It's a cute musical effect.
What do you call? Where else do you hear that? I call it like part of the Obi-Wan twinkle, which is, well, part of it would be like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's also that.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which, is part of the Force cue, I guess, theme, but it's also a discrete, like, unique thing that is used separately from the Force theme. Yeah,
absolutely. Like a little Force flourish or something like that. which is interesting because in the later films, especially in the sequel era, but I think, oh gosh, I think as early as perhaps even Empire, when Luke is reaching for the lightsaber, I'm going to say, Williams starts to associate, tremolo strings with the power of the Force. But definitely in the sequel trilogy, a lot of the stuff that Kylo Ren does gets these really wild, like buzzing strings, you know, like it's like a swarm of bees or something. I can't even begin to imitate it with but yeah, so I think the Force has a small little set of musical sound effects. Even this is probably the first one. I don't think there's any any music when he uses the mind trick on Tatooine.
Oh,
Is that unscored?
There is when we meet Ben, though.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And that little flourish,
Yeah.
that's definitely like when he pulls his hood down.
He's like, hello there.
Yeah. One all-time great moment. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think that's maybe the kind of, you know, it's not overplaying. It's not like a da-da, here's the Force.
Because the Force theme isn't there. It's not.
Yeah. Although, and look, I know you've probably, I mean, I know actually that you've been through this already, but the kind of, you know, is it the Force theme? Is it Ben's theme in this film in particular? So I don't know, maybe Williams is not thinking of it quite in the same way as he does definitely in later films here. But yeah, I mean, he could have. I mean, it would equally work because Ben's the only one who's using the Force at this time. So chucking in Ben Kenobi's theme would have worked very well, I'm sure. But yeah, anyway, you know, going back to earlier in the music, you were saying there are little beeps, and that's really interesting. I've always heard them as like piano, like ultra high piano. But I might be wrong. I think
I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Because as there are so many things that this week I've been discovering are in the music and not in the sound effects that I thought were vice versa. So
yeah. Well, you know, actually, maybe this is a good time to own up. When I saw the original Star Wars trilogy for the first time as a kid, I just assumed all films were musicals, because I'd basically only seen Disney films and, like, you know, classic 60s musicals before this point. And so I kept waiting, like, when does the song come in? And in Return of the Jedi, you know, 3 films in, about time to reveal themselves as a musical.
Oh my gosh.
Obi-Wan says, "So the Emperor has already won," in such a lilting musical way that I was like, here it comes. Here comes the song.
Surely that's the introduction. That's the
Yeah. This is like the sort of spoken sung intro. How did I even get to that point? Sorry. Yeah.
Confusing,
You know, yeah. But I think you're totally right. You know, that because Star Wars is such a oral film, it's such a sonic film, you know, the music and the sound effects do so much. Like, actually, have you listened to the radio plays, the NPR ones?
What's radio plays?
Oh, oh my God, I cannot recommend this enough.
Is it a series?
Yeah, so NPR, I think the story is that George Lucas sold the rights to, I think his name was Brian Daly, who was like a radio play.
Oh, do you mean the old Star Wars radio thingy? Oh, I know what you mean. But I haven't heard it.
Oh, they are so fantastic. So yeah, he sold the rights, I think, for like $1. And they produced this incredible incredible series
radio
which
drama.
goes to radio drama. Yeah, radio player. Yeah, exactly. Same difference. Radio drama, and Mark Hamill is in it, and Anthony Daniels is in it as well. I think they're the only original cast members. The rest are recast. But the thing that's really crucial about it, that ties it all together, is they all use the original sound effects. They all use the original John Williams music. And it just, that's it. I kind of almost feel like you don't need the visuals. Sacrilege in a way, but it's just so effective just with the audio. And so I think you're totally right that the sound effects and the music, they go so well with each other. I'm really glad actually that on this podcast you include the sound of the film, because you can hear how well everything goes with each other. So no, absolutely. Anyway, so I think it might be piano, but I'm not sure.
Now I'm curious. Now we have to listen again. Okay.
Yeah.
You seen that new BT-16? Yeah, some of the other guys were telling me about it. They say it's quite famous. What was that? That's nothing. Outgassing. Don't worry about it.
It was before this, maybe.
It was before, yeah.
That. Oh, I think it is a
Give me regular
piano.
reports, please.
I heard it.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
This big walking carpet out of my way.
No reward
It's-
for this.
It's not.
It's super high pitched. It's about to come.
Yeah, it's like probably like the highest note you can play on a piano.
Give me regular reports, please. Right? Do you know what's going on?
Why does
Maybe it's
you know
another
what?
drill.
It must be a harp, because I think it's higher than the highest note of the piano.
Yeah,
because it's a G,
okay.
and the highest note of the piano is a C, right?
Yeah.
It's this, but it's like, well, this
An
keyboard doesn't
octave
go
higher,
higher, but yeah. It must maybe okay. Yeah,
Unless
that's funny. It sounds like beeps, but now that I hear it,
Mm.
I'm convinced it's a harp or a piano.
Yeah. Yeah. And another really interesting thing about this sequence as well is I feel like the strings are doing much the same figure as they were when we last saw Ben, but there's more of them. Like I think there's been more parts added in, and it just thickens it. It's kind of like, as I was saying before, it's like, hey, meanwhile, like, while you were concentrating on Han and Leia arguing, all this other stuff was happening. And to remind you, we're going back to what you heard before, but more of it to intensify subtly. It's a really neat little trick.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the ways that these scores are mixed they're like pre-mixed in the way that they're orchestrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the vibraphone, I think this is
It's
where
so
we get
good.
that. Dun, dun, dun.
This makes me want to be a vibraphone player.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they say that orchestras are always really happy when they know they're playing a John Williams score, the percussion section, that is, because they know that they're going to get something good.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're about to get to a pretty big shift. And I'm really excited. So let's just get into it.
Yeah.
There she is.
C-3PO, do you copy?
Yes, sir.
Are you safe?
For the moment.
We're in the main hangar across from the ship. We're right above you. Stand by.
You came in that thing?
You're braver than I thought.
Nice. Come on.
That part makes me so happy.
I know. It's so good. I mean, yeah, so, we get the first real, theme of this section, which is, Luke's theme, or the main title theme.
Mhm.
But, it feels like there's a real sense of momentum to it, I think, especially because it's come at the end of now, probably a minute or two of fairly melodic music. It's like, ooh, finally we're getting somewhere. There's a real sense that, like, after all this kind of messing around and haphazard stuff, like maybe we might be in with a chance, I think is what the music is telling us. We're not there yet, it's not celebrating quite yet, but it's kind of like, yeah, we might celebrate in the future. I think there's maybe a little bit of pedal tone going on. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to
like in a low instrument.
Yeah, or like there's something about the harmony that feels like it's sort of weighing down the melody a little bit. So it feels
I
like
totally know.
melodies-
I totally feel that.
Yeah, it feels like it's trying to break away from the harmony a little bit. It's like the melody's wanting to escape the Death Star, but the harmony is just saying, like, hold on, not yet. You came in that thing, like, you're braver than I thought. Like we're still against the odds here.
Because it feels like the first time it's like or it's and then when it modulates up for the second time it does it feels more like the whole platform has raised.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm getting that pedal tone vibe. Let's hear that again.
Yeah.
So listeners, pedal tone is like when there is kind of an underlying constant note that is anchoring the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
There she is.
C-3PO, do you copy?
Yes, sir.
Are you safe?
For the moment.
We're in the main hangar across from the ship. We're right above you. Stand by.
Totally.
You came in that thing? You're brave.
Yeah. It goes up a whole step where there's the Yeah. And
Yeah.
just shout out to this fun violin part. I love when there's a fun violin part. That's not the melody. It just goes. It's fun. That's fun stuff.
Also what I was thinking that reminds me of is that it kind of almost feels like the DNA for the Alliance Assembly music in Return of the Jedi when they're getting ready to strike on the second Death Star. It's this kind of prototypical, the Rebel Alliance are a plucky band of upstarts, but they're in with a chance sort of music. I feel like that's what it's doing in both cases.
Because of the modulatory, or because of the which aspect of it, or the violin thing?
The strings. It's the strings. Definitely. Doing this kind of excited. To me, it feels like pit of your stomach, nerves, excitement, optimism. Because I think that Alliance Assembly music also has a pedal tone going on. I'm just trying to think of how it goes now. I've got this section stuck in my head. Da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun 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 dun. I wish I could play that in front. Hopefully that rings a bell.
Yes.
But like this really, it feels like again, like, oh, we might just pull this off. And I feel like there's just a little thread of that in this section. It's such a cool little moment, such a little reprieve, like that, as we've said, the last few minutes have been a little bit more keeping a lid on it. And suddenly it's kind of like, oh yeah, we can do it.
For me, it's like the part where it switches to the new key or the new tonal bass. It's like the three preparation notes that somehow they just like really do it for me. It's like we're getting ready. I'll point them out when we get there. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. Please do point them out though.
All right, computer.
The main hangar across from the ship.
We're
We're right above you. Stand by.
You came in that thing?
Yeah.
You're braver than I thought.
Nice. Come on.
Yeah. It's like just finding your footing before actually setting off, isn't it? It's kind of like, yeah, this is where we're starting. Okay, I'll just hit that note a few more times just to be sure before I jump off.
Yeah, it's like trying to, yeah, I know the feeling. Like if I'm playing a piece that starts on a high note, I'm like, right before I start, I'm like, okay. Kind of make sure that I have it before fully committing to playing it. Yeah,
absolutely. That's really cool. Actually, I've never really noticed those before. You're totally right. Yeah. That's so cool.
You got to warm up the pipes a little bit. So that thing repeats, but higher, which is kind of a common, I guess, technique. Just repeat the same thing, but do it either higher or do it lower, depending on emotionally what you need to convey or physically. So here we're ramping up, so we go higher. And I actually like this line that comes up in, okay, Leia says, you came in on that thing. You're braver than I thought. And then Han says, nice, which I don't know why I like it, but it's maybe it's because it's so weird. It's like such a weird thing to say. Like, nice. It almost makes me register that this is flirting because he's like, nice comeback, like nice, like instead of, I don't know.
No, absolutely. I think their dialogue is also what gives a lot of the film energy at this point as well. You know, that real kind of sparkling wit. It's I think most people credit Gloria Katz and Willard. I don't know quite how to say his name. Huyck, 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 perhaps, who were really good friends of George Lucas's, and they did, I think, kind of an uncredited polish of all of this kind of dialogue in the script, which really, I think gives it, all of Han and Leia's kind of smarm and sparkling attitude, I think comes from them rather than necessarily George Lucas. I think he would be the first to admit that. And yeah, I just, it's so good. Yeah, you're right. Like registering it as flirting is kind of, it's kind of like, yeah, you're being nasty to me, you're being nasty, and I'm being nasty to you, but it's also kind of a game, and we both kind of know that.
Yeah. So continuing along.
It's them. Blast them.
Get back to the ship! Where are you going? Come back!
Certainly has courage.
What good will it do us if he gets himself killed?
So the technical term for the for what's happening in the violin there is dugga-duggas.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we get a lot more of them later. Yeah. It's just a fun cue, where it's kind of like, okay, we've been creeping around, and here's the gloriously accidental transition into being chased again.
Mm-hmm. And right out the gate, it's that fast violin stuff. It's like metered sixteenths. That's why we call them duggas. Doing fast stuff, more so for the effect, and it's kind of low in the mix. But if you listen to the soundtrack, you can hear it louder. And then we have the first troopers, saying "blast, it's them, blast them," and the way that it goes. Which is how it ends. I feel like that's a common, or I've noticed that type of technique, or I don't know, thing in other parts of the score too, where it sort of oscillates between two different 2-note cells. It's like kind of winding up, and then resolving on something that's a half step higher. because we got it in the trash compactor where it was like. Probably wasn't easy to hear that, but it was going tritone, minor seventh, tritone, minor seventh, major seventh, and that's how it resolved as well.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. That's really cool. I kind of wonder, like, that kind of rhythmic I don't know, I kind of want to call it like chugging, you know, like it's this sense
It feels
of like
yeah.
I feel like in a way, like you know, obviously you hear that in Jaws in very chromatic ways.
Good point.
But his disaster film soundtracks of the early 70s, like Side and Adventure, Earthquake, and Towering Inferno, you know, that kind of whole orchestra percussion, you know, like little I guess ostinato to some degree. Ostinato is a repeating rhythmic pattern. Yeah, like yeah, and you know, then it evolves like in Indiana Jones, like the almost like musical onomatopoeia, like where in The Last Crusade, when there's the boat scene and he's interrogating what's his name, Kazim, against the propeller, and the music is like dun 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 as the propeller goes round, like yeah, it's just another lovely little John Williamsism.
I think that's what musical onomatopoeia is exactly. Well, is it exactly why we are confusing like harps with beeps and doors with cymbals, and that was me in other parts. There's it. I bet I'm sure I will come across many other things that I think are sound design, but that are in the score, which is really interesting because I tend to think of super modern scores as the ones that are very sound designy. But even if you go back to Star Wars, there already is it. What it comes down to is that the orchestra as an instrument is very underrated in terms of its range of what it can sound like.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know that this is, you know, John Williams really reviving not just a particular sound, but a way of composing to the frame. You know, like he, you know, in the late 60s with New Hollywood, you know, the sort of reliance on found music or pop songs or perhaps a little bit more avant-garde sort of stuff, and the kind of distaste for Mickey Mousing. You know, like John Williams is kind of, I think there's such a power in the way that his scores live in every frame generally. There are a few exceptions to that, but you know, the fact that you can mistake the orchestra for a sound effect because the orchestra is designed to hit that beat when something happens on screen. Just think that's so cool. Yeah.
Would you call what John Williams is doing here Mickey Mousing?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because it's not designed to be quite so tight in terms of mimicking an action, I would say. You know, there are some instances, I think, of Mickey Mousing in most of the Star Wars films, but I think, in this case, it's more just that's the way that he composes. He composes to the frame. And so, you know, he's always lining up kind of what he's writing with what he's seeing in a very specific way. But Mickey Mousing in the scene, I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so either, but I hadn't really thought of that space in between Mickey Mousing and not Mickey Mousing because so that's actually helpful for me thinking because composing to the frame is what it feels like, but then I'm like, but it doesn't feel like Mickey Mousing, so there is like a little bit of a distinction, or like
And what's interesting about that historically as well is that the serials that Star Wars was inspired by, like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, they usually used oh gosh, I've totally forgotten the term for it. Music where it's like in a library music. Sorry, that's what I'm looking for. Where it's not composed specifically for the series. Like one of the Flash Gordons actually opens with a little bit from The Bride of Frankenstein, which I think some people suggest is where maybe the Rebel fanfare comes from, because one of the motifs from The Bride of Frankenstein goes da 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 da.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so that kind of gets translated through Flash Gordon to Star Wars, and I think kind of probably becomes the Rebel fanfare. Da 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 da.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, this is another digression, but yeah, like those original series didn't have music written for them in the same groove. You know, if anything lined up, it's probably more so because a music editor was being very smart and clever in the way that they used the music. And so although John Williams, you know, it's the whole project of Star Wars, which is like, it's like, remember this thing that you used to love, now we're doing it better, because you can't see the little fishing reel that's holding up the spaceship. You know, the explosions look pretty good. The aliens, you know, they're not bad. The world design is pretty fantastic. That's
So you're saying like an upgrade to the 40s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of, you know, that's what nostalgia is as a kind of screen project. I mean, in my Star Wars book, I talk about Rogue One and how when they did the 1977 accurate stormtrooper helmets, they had the grill on the side of the stormtrooper helmets in the original film is just a sticker. And that's kind of fine because the cameras, you know, we never get a close up of the stormtrooper helmet really, and the lighting is such that it doesn't really appear as a sticker, obviously. But in Rogue One, by the time of 2016, the cameras are HD, digital, the lighting is incredible, you know, like a grill is not going to cut it. And so in order to be nostalgic and kind of accurate to what we think we remember, they actually have to do it better. And that's the same with even like the digital Tarkin, the sort of, you know, not quite deep fake then, but digital, you know, Peter Cushing, is that his face had to be done differently because of the lighting of Rogue One, which is a 2016 style cinematography, what's cool then, as opposed to the very flat lighting in 1977. And so he has to be kind of almost like digitally revived, but better. And so that's what Star Wars has always done. And that's what it's doing in 1977 too, is it's going, hey, remember those serials? We're going to revive them, but we're going to do them better. And so I think that's also what John Williams is doing with the music. To bring one of my long digressions back to where we started again, is that he's going, hey, you know, you probably remember the orchestral sound of these serials that you've seen, you know, from the 1930s and 40s, but actually more likely recently 50s and 60s on TV, which is where George Lucas saw them. That's the same genre of music we're doing now, but I'm going to do it better because I'm writing to the individual moment and writing these really nimble scores that can turn on a dime. Yeah.
Nimble. Yeah. It is nimble. Yeah. Not to get into another digression, but I think it's funny that like just considering the evolution of film music to the 2020s now, even though technology has, you know, just kept improving, I think the nimbleness of scores has kind of started going back the other direction.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You know, like you hear so often these days, like, you know, whenever someone like Hans Zimmer gives an interview, it's kind of like, well, I got this script outline from Christopher Nolan or whatever, I think he talks about this with Interstellar, and I wrote this like 30-minute response to a general plot outline, and, that formed the basis of the score. He's not writing to the frame, he's writing to the overall mood of the film, and then that's kind of added. Now, John Williams has done that. JFK, for example, he wrote 6 sections of music in response to, I think, a script and maybe an early cut, and then they were adapted out. And that was really just because of practicalities, because I think at the time with JFK, he was working on maybe Hook or something, another film that he had to give his full priority to. So it does happen, and certainly there are predecessors like Ennio Morricone, this kind of European tradition, like Morricone would write music that would often be played on set. Like by the time of Once Upon a Time in America, the last Western, no, that's not true, sorry, one of the later Westerns that he did with Leone, his music was being played on set. In fact, the famous camera movement of the camera kind of revealing the town early on in the film was timed to Morricone's music, not the other way around, like timed on set. So there are all sorts of different ways of doing it, but traditionally in Hollywood, it's been much more of the closely locked in groove between sound and image, and music and image. And you're totally right, Xanthi, that at the moment, I think, we've definitely gone in the other direction, where we have perhaps music written before filming has even begun, or certainly not written to the frame. I think that's kind of seen as a little bit uncool.
Anachronistic.
Except for animation.
Right, which is still very much in the Mickey Mousing vein a lot of the time.
Which is why you get, these wonderful throwback scores like How to Train Your Dragon, which, with the exception of a few digital recording flourishes and sounds to that score, I mean, that could be from any era of Hollywood.
Where were we?
Great. Why don't we just go on to the next little bit, because otherwise,
let's go to the next bit.
He gets himself killed. Come on.
I love Han yelling there. It's so funny. So they're all running around wildly, being chased.
I think we took a wrong turn.
Yeah. So we've got like that little stormtrooper motif, and the Imperial motif, which I really like that. I'm really sad that. Well, look, obviously I'm not really sad because the Imperial March is so brilliant, but I kind of feel like that little Imperial motif deserved a little bit more than we get of it in the overall Star Wars series. It's a fun little. It's like a mustache twiddling, twirling villainy.
It's one of the many. It's one of the many aspects of the score that feels so Tchaikovsky to me. It reminds me of Nutcracker. There, that do 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 do. It reminds me of. What am I thinking of? The air coffee dance. The do 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 do.
Yes. No, you're so right. I'm sold.
Okay, good.
No, for sure. But it's, it's fun and really starting to get back into the action. And there's that huge little, that's a nice contradiction. The brass sort of fanfare that plays as Han realizes that he's basically messed up. That's sort of starting to get towards heroic, but it's really just kind of like a lot of bluster, which is really what this scene is.
It's so much bluster. And the yelling, which has got, that had to have been the funniest ADR session.
Yeah.
Is he like yelling to intimidate them? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also like a reflection of kind of like, yeah, I know this is not a good idea, but I guess I'll puff myself up, make myself seem scary.
It's like when
Um,
you're supposed to do when you see a mountain lion or something.
yeah, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
start screaming and looking really big.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here it's the snakes. You got to stomp your feet, and they apparently they run away. Yeah. Yeah. So no, it's a nice little, and again, I think one of the real skills of Williams is cueing the listener into knowing whether the sense of momentum is accidental or with purpose. And I think this section again is kind of like really accidental. It's like, okay, we've started, falling through the funfair again, like it's this kind of, well, we don't really know where we're going. We kind of were in control, and now it's just kind of making it up again as we go territory. And it's kind of working, but I don't know, I wouldn't get your hopes up type mood.
The accidental, that's an interesting point that I haven't thought about. The accident, what is it? The momentum you were saying, accidental momentum, because here we have that violin, that triplet figure. It's going like, and it kind of just cuts off. Like it sounds like it's been prematurely cut off, which of course is, on purpose, but it takes us by surprise because the music doesn't inevitably lead us to being cut off like that. It really mirrors what's happening when Luke and Leia peer over this big chasm, and the music stops there, or basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this whole next cue is,
oh my gosh, it's like my favorite. Let's do it. All right, so they're balancing off of the cliff/bridge.
I think I just blasted it.
They're coming through!
Okay, this is really good stuff.
yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah. Well, look, I think this and the next section that we're about to get into as well, they're probably the most obvious, pardon me, throwback to the Golden Age of film scoring. I think the original cue, like on the cue sheet, exactly. I mean, which is just, it's a giveaway, right? And it, it really just, it's like, here we are in traditional adventure territory, especially, when we get to the swing across, which we'll hear in a little
I cut
bit.
it off before we got to the B section.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's like, we know what's going on here, because it's not really in fitting with the rest of the action of this whole Death Star sequence. It's really kind of like, why are we swinging across this chasm? Oh, because that's what Errol Flynn would do. and that's kind of what the music is saying, and it's setting us up here to go, this is traditional adventure. This is fun. This is, designed to be the heroes in a pickle. Observe as they ingeniously and with daring do escape. It's
a word I don't hear very much. Daring do.
Yeah. But it's such a wonderful cue, and so much fun, and I imagine terrifying for a string player.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. String players are doing a lot of fast stuff on the
Yeah.
E string. It's a lot of fast stuff. I'm going to play it without all of the sound effects now so that we can get a clearer sense of what's happening here musically. And I would agree that I'm fascinated by this cue because it feels so specific. Like it feels like its own microcosm within the score. And it just feels so different. Like something about it just feels so different. I think what you said, where this section in particular is a very obvious, distinct like throwback. I definitely hear that too. And one of the things that I'm also noting is this the first time we hear the main theme in this film on the brass, like in the triumphant way? Before then, I feel like we hear it in the naive way, where it's, we've called it like the homespun Luke, or the,
the farm boy version. Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. I think as well, it's the first time, in the next part of the cue that we hear the secondary part of it.
That's for sure.
But I think you're right. It's the first time, and it's almost like we warmed up to it earlier with the section where you came in that thing, you're braver than I thought. It's like, okay, cool. Now here's a glimpse of what's to come, and now it's like, okay, now Luke's kind of being the hero living adventure that he kind of hoped or perhaps destined to become.
Yes. Like musically here, it sounds like the destiny has been reached, or like this is what his theme was meant to be doing. But anyway, I'm going to play it now. Not over. This part. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
It's so good. And no, go on.
It's so unabashedly heroic. Like it's not trying to be cool. It doesn't cut itself off. It like fully plays out. And I think that's something I just really appreciate about it. It goes all the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's kind of, in that same, sort of corn gold reference mode. I was thinking before, I should have said, is that scene in Jaws where they encounter the shark for the first time, and the boat does this huge turnaround where they think they've kind of caught the shark for the first time, and the music suddenly out of nowhere in this otherwise, pretty stark horror-filled music, it goes and it's like the bum 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 bum, and it's this real like Errol Flynn needs to be swinging on a on a rope off the side of this ship. It really feels like the Seahawk or something like that, and so this is, again, I think this is the other real moment where these two moments go perfectly together, where John Williams is like, hey, remember that cool time we used to have with the orchestra back in the 30s. But no, and the other thing that I was thinking when you played it just then is that it's so kind of segmented. It's almost like it's a really big slide, and you climb to the top of it and slide down rapidly, and then there's this sort of moment as you're sort of climbing back up again. And then there are these little starts and stops, where the start is enormous fun, and then it kind of peters out of energy, and then starts again as you go back down the slide.
Do you mean those parts where it's like dee-dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee-dee, where it's like pluck, pluck, where it
Yeah.
kind of gives you a few extra bars before doing it again.
That's right.
Yeah, I love those parts.
Yeah. That's it just amplifies the fun, doesn't it? Because it's kind of like, yeah, we've got these big bold sections, but here we're just gonna take 2 beats for the woodwinds to go plonk plonk and then and then start again. It's enormous fun. And then, and then you've got, the string counterline, which I never really
It's disastrous to play.
Yeah. Surely that's among the most tricky things that John Williams writes for strings, at least in this first film. I didn't notice it, to be honest, until we did this score on Art of the Score, and Nick, one of the co-hosts, is a violinist, and he was just like, he was like, hold on, what?
Yeah.
What are we doing there?
Yeah. I will not be demonstrating this.
Oh, go on. But can we just play that section? So
yeah, definitely.
People can listen to what's happening there.
Let's play it again, but talk through it.
Yeah, cool.
So this is them going back up the slide.
Yeah.
Now they're going back up the slide again, climbing up.
Yep.
Now this part, the violins. That part reminds me of the march in Nutcracker.
Oh, yeah.
And now here, the bass instruments are getting the melody.
Yeah.
Going back up the slide again. Different slide. Leia. That line is very heroic.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? That da-da-da-da, that's just the briefest glimpse of Leia's theme as it develops in the full suite. I actually think that's probably the only time that we hear that. In the suite where it goes da 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 da.
Oh, it's like a really interesting random section, like slice of it, kind of out of context.
I think that's probably the only time we hear. I've never noticed that. I mean, I've probably subconsciously noticed, but I've never really. That's cool. This is what happens when you break down the score into this level of detail. That's so cool.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Orchestration wise, it's like an orchestration show. Like as an orchestra, this would be very fun to play. I can't say that about all film scores. A lot of film scores are extremely boring to play.
Yeah.
And difficult in the ways that don't pay off.
Yeah.
Because they're written on piano. So
or like Demi Breves for strings for 8 bars. Yeah.
Yeah, like doing fifths on a violin are not as easy as they are on a piano. Yeah. But here the melody goes from it's definitely primarily in brass, if not all in brass, but the energy of the percussion of the timpani, this would be fun to play as a timpani player too. And then when the melody goes into the lower instruments, that's another. I don't know. It would just be so much fun to play. And the kind of counter lines that are everywhere just make it so kinetic. And this one part, I isolated this part in advance because I want to get your take on it. That is, it gives me I have some sort of some sort of a memory with that line where it just triggers something where I'm like, Nutcracker. Right there.
I'm stunned. You're so right. Once again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so right. This is, when I think of the influences of this score, Tchaikovsky's not high. I would,
I know, and very rarely talked about.
Yeah, like you can go through the whole. I was going to say host of, but I was tempted to say the whole holst of influences.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah. But Tchaikovsky's not one that is drawn attention to that much. But you've totally sold me between that and the Imperial motif. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Well done. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. To be fair, I don't think it's so much when people talk about the other inspirations. Of course, we're talking about like King's Row. And the focus. Anyway, I have a whole TED talk about how those don't feel very alike at all to me. But a lot of the focus is on the intervals, on the construction of the melody line. But I think with Tchaikovsky, a lot of what I feel is something that I'm not a musicologist or like on that side of, I'm not on that side of music academia at all. I'm on the performer composer side. So like, it's the kind of thing that I only know from years of playing in orchestras and just, I don't know, through osmosis, kind of getting a sense of orchestration and just something that is not easy to necessarily, I don't know. It's not as clear of an example as that. It's just, I listen to stuff and I'm like, okay, that reminds me of this part. This thing, and so often it's like a Tchaikovsky thing.
Yeah, and I think you used the word kinetic before, and I just think that's the perfect way to describe this section. But also, I think it's the perfect way to summarize that Tchaikovsky influence, I think, as well, because apart from Tchaikovsky having really clear, memorable melodies, especially in the Nutcracker and stuff like that. I think what makes his music so successful even today is the fact that each little piece has its own little energy and own little flow, and there's often that same sense of momentum, that same sense of kineticism. Of course, it was designed to be danced to. It's a ballet. That I think you're totally right. I think that kind of energy carries through to this section in particular. Yeah.
And he has definite like swashbuckling energy in the violin concerto.
Yeah. Maybe we need to see if someone can set a ballet to this section of Star Wars.
It already is.
Yeah.
Basically.
True. It already is. Yeah.
They're swinging across a thing. They could do a big leap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what a cool little section.
I think I cut you off on something that you were going to add there.
I don't know. I've probably cut you off a million times, so let's call it even.
Something that I heard you say on Art of the Score podcast, which listeners definitely should listen to the episodes that they did about Star Wars. Something that you were adamant about is how the main theme is Luke Skywalker's theme. And so that really speaks to me. And here, having it symbolize, like having it associated with Luke in this moment really sells that for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I still am adamant. Particularly in this film, but for the whole Star Wars saga, I think Williams is pretty consistent. That's Luke's theme. It's not just a general Star Wars theme. It's kind of weird that it's used as the opening crawl in a way, because it surfaces in films that have nothing to do with Luke, and then disappears for the rest of the movie until the end credits. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, but particularly in this film and in Empire Strikes Back, it's so clearly Luke's theme. It gets twisted and compressed and put under stress when Luke is under stress, and made naive when Luke is naive. And here is having an incredible rollicking adventure while Luke is having an incredible rollicking adventure. Yeah, definitely.
It's so fun. It's so fun. And the B section, this is the first time the B section it has appeared in this film, except for the opening crawl. And I think a listener actually asked this question toward the beginning of the season. Maybe it was you, John. I think you asked if the medal ceremony was the only time that we hear the B section, or if we hear it again. And so here's the answer. We hear it here. And it's a rare treat to hear the B section.
We also, my favorite, I'm really just indulging myself now, but my favorite sneaky appearance of the B section is in Return of the Jedi again, when the Rebel fleet is about to go to hyperspace, and it's put in so obliquely. It's like a little Easter egg. It goes dun 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 bum ba da 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 dum dum bum ba da da dum ba da da dum bum bum bum.
One of the things here, it goes. Let's see. Do you know what I mean when I just
yeah?
It's right after Leia kisses Luke.
Yeah,
and we get the do 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 do.
Yeah,
that string thing.
Yeah, and I think as well. About Leia kissing Luke. This is often put forward as one of the unfortunate moments, not as unfortunate as we get in Empire, but because of the later decision of Lucas to make them brother and sister. But, there's basically been no chemistry between them before this moment. I kind of feel like it's really just another acknowledgement that, hey, this is an Errol Flynn, this is a Seahawk Robin Hood moment, because that's what would happen. Because as well, like Leia doesn't really seem like a kiss for luck person, I have to say.
That's so true.
Yeah, it sort of feels like a genre homage rather than anything either of the characters would actually do.
Yeah, this whole part feels like the dream sequence of something.
And so that trumpet line that you were just talking about, Xanthi, is sort of almost like it's like the little bow on the top. Like, da-da-da-da.
Something about it feels so familiar used in many things to signify a similar thing way. Like it's just it's something about like that second inversion major. Because so it's. I don't know exactly what about it makes it sound so heroic and directional. Because it's not.
No.
It's. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, but I know it's like a lot of military stuff would be kind of has that same pattern.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to completely guess, and this is kind of a guess, but it's kind of like, that's the intervals, the natural intervals of a trumpet or a bugle.
Is it the natural intervals? Is that why?
Yeah, because that's, like a bugle call is, as you just played, the dum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum bum. A bugle has no valves, so the shifts between those notes are being done purely with the player's lips.
Wait, so the player's lips naturally fall into those notes?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's
wow.
that's it's like so I'm which is also why I'm kind of envying the great string playing in this section, because I'm much more of a woodwind and brass player. And so when you play trumpet and bugle, it's the same, or trombone, just in a different octave. It's like the same. It's like da 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 da, like that's kind of, which is why you get yeah, exactly what you just played before, or like the last post, da da dun 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 dun, like that. That's on bugle, and so that's done purely with the changing of the kind of tightness of your lips,
like the embouchure.
Yeah, the embouchure. Yeah, and with a trumpet, you have valves, so you can play the notes between.
Mm-hmm.
But on a bugle, you don't. You can only play those notes. So,
but there's still the guideposts, even on a trumpet. If you weren't going to finger the trumpet, those.
That's right.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I have gone on too long without knowing that. No, but it's it's a revelation for me. I feel this way sometimes when people are talking about string writing and really analyzing why there's so many, like, I don't know, like open stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things, whenever I hear stuff like that, a lot of it is just like, it's very string friendly. Like, that's the explanation, is it's string it's violin friendly. It's like easy and nice to play, like that. It's not that necessarily someone wanted to do like 16th note sextuplets spanning in this whatever inversion of this chord. It's just that it's a very easy, natural type of thing to play on strings. And you know, if you're using open strings on the violin without using any fingers, it doesn't fall into fourths, but it falls into fifths. And that would be the reason for doing that a lot of the time. And so now thank you.
No,
thanks for that.
No, and that to me is such a fascinating conversation as well, because I think that's also the thing that is a little bit different about, say, John Williams, who is also working with a team of usually incredibly gifted orchestrators. You know, Herb Spencer for this, Angela Morley as well, just a fantastic composer in her own right. Who know the instruments of the orchestra back to front and what works and what's easy. Actually, one of the most interesting things I've read about John Williams recently is I read an interview where he was talking about his early days composing for TV, and because he was composing for a house orchestra, there was, just so many opportunities for him to go down to this practically semi-permanently engaged house orchestra and just go, walk around to the double basses and go, does that note, does that work there for you? Is that easy for you to play? Or to the French horns and go, hey, French horn is a ridiculously difficult instrument to play. Just sort of go, well, what would work there for you? Or like if I'm putting in a French horn trill, of which there are several in Star Wars, some really tricky little passages for something like French horn, but they're written because he knows what a French horn can do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's quite different, not to, like a a composer like Hans Zimmer or any that follow in his style are, maybe more familiar with what a synthesizer can do and the possibilities of digitally created music. But I think, the tools that they're working with are quite different, and exactly all of this that we've been talking about, the tools that John Williams is working with are shaping his music and understanding the possibilities of the actual instrument and the player is incredibly important.
In my last season, I was talking to a violinist, Lorenz Gama, who played on the on the sequel soundtracks, and he was telling me that he was saying, like, take an arpeggio for example, if it's written like for piano and not kind of this might be really easy on a piano, but then like if that's what you print out for the violins, it ends up being this it's like super awkward to play just a simple arpeggio in this, but you could make it easier if you knew to just go or something like that. Like just these little changes that don't necessarily fundamentally change the intent, but is like, I don't know. it's one of those things you can make your players' lives easier and also make it sound more natural with little tweaks, and that it really requires knowing orchestration. And sometimes I listen to scores that even though they were written on, or even though they're performed with a live orchestra, or at least augmented by a live orchestra, because there are some contracts with certain things, or sometimes you have to use a live orchestra. It still, to me, sounds sometimes like it is a synth because it's written in a way where it's like, and not reorchestrated, or it's written in a way that kind of mimics the block chords that might be easy to do on the piano synthesizer.
Yeah. Absolutely. I found this stunning as somebody who doesn't play in an orchestra. I just listen to a lot of them. But speaking to some musicians about the Lord of the Rings scores, which I've always thought of as being very, very orchestrally accomplished, I don't know if, as a string player. Yeah, I've heard that string players really strongly dislike playing Lord of the Rings because the strings in particular often end up with just these long passages of held notes, the for like minutes at a time. And yeah, like, I mean, I this is not to put them down. I think they're tremendously effective myself, but I was stunned to speak musicians, and they're like, oh god, we have to play Lord of the Rings, oh no. Whereas I'm like, oh fantastic, I can sit down and watch an orchestra play Lord of the Rings. So yeah really
as an instrumentalist, I mean, and you probably feel the same, not necessarily with orchestral music, but like, do you feel like your taste sometimes, like, you like things that are easier to play? Or like, I have a natural affinity toward composers like Tchaikovsky because a lot of his music is fun to play, and not only, and by fun to play, I don't just mean like the music's fun. I mean, there's something satisfying about the input that you give it and the output that you get from, like, in terms of effort you put into what you're playing and the reward that you are given. Sometimes some composers, you put in like a high amount of either effort technically with fast fingers, or with just the sheer amount of like weight you have to give to something to play something super, super loud and to sustain it, to make it, and it comes out sounding like it's easy, but it really takes a lot of like effort to just do that note. That's how I feel about playing a lot of Wagner. But
right.
But it has nothing to do with my experience as a listener. It has more to do with my experience as a player. But I'm already kind of like, when I listen to things, I feel like I feel like I don't know what it's called, like a sympathetic aversion to things that I wouldn't want to play.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I feel like we've got a long way. But the last thing I was going to say about this little section of score is I just really like the way that we get the isolated brass at the end of that section that we've just heard. I just think that's very Star Wars. That's a kind of thing that I feel like your Giacchinos or your John Powell's have really latched onto when they have composed in the Star Wars mode afterwards as well.
So you're talking about the brass triplets?
Yeah.
Where it's the whole section.
Yeah. And the whole section in isolation. There's not really anything accompanying them.
Right. Just like the triad.
Yeah. And I think actually for me, again, going to the influences table, I think actually this that kind of use of brass is very similar to just one cue from a film called The Battle of Britain, which is one of the films that George Lucas used to assemble the dogfighting scenes as test shots to send to ILM to go, hey, this is what I want, but in space.
It was part of the temp track?
Well, I don't know if it was a temp track or not, and this is why I think it's interesting. So George Lucas used The Battle of Britain. He used 633 Squadron and a Korean War film called The Bridges of Toko-ri. And he kind of spliced them together with, I think, actual dogfighting footage from World War II, is kind of like, this is what these scenes should look like back in the day when, you know, there was nothing to base that on. He, you know, ILM was inventing stuff from thin air. But one of those films, The Battle of Britain, has this wonderful score by Ron Goodwin, but it was actually a replacement score for something written by William Walton, who's a, you know, very accomplished and respected composer. Did a fair bit of film music, but his score was rejected, which is remarkable. It would be, you know, kind of like, I don't know, getting a luminary of the classical world, I don't know, and then saying, actually, nah, sorry. Your work wasn't good enough, but one track was retained, and it's called The Battle in the Air. It's a dogfighting sequence, and to me there are a lot of these really isolated bits of brass that sort of or all these big brass runs that to me, I'm like, that's what I hear when I hear these sections, but particularly later in the film when the brass underscores a lot of the space dogfight sequences.
Interesting.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the brass section as a whole, or at least these three. What instruments would this exactly be? Trumpets? 3 trumpets?
No,
French horns in there too, right?
Yeah, I think French horns.
Yeah.
Definitely the da-da-da-da, the really fun brass melody. That's like trombones, I think.
Yeah.
It's
like strong, but also like because they're isolated and there's no strings, there's no woodwinds. It also feels vulnerable. I don't know if that's the right word, but something about it feels smaller. It's almost like a call and response thing, and they're the call, and then the orchestra responds or something like that. But,
I think that's totally right. Yeah, a lot of this sequence, totally right, is call and response. Yeah.
Anyway, that was a great cue. Yeah, really good, really good.
And it is the what we're seeing is call and response, right? It's like the stormtroopers are shooting at Luke and Leia, and then Luke and Leia shoot back.
Yeah,
it fit.
Yeah, and those little moments of respite between the theme starting up again are kind of It's all, even though it's like this is a go moment. Everything's go. There, like you said earlier, there are those moments of there's still slight refractory periods, and
absolutely. It's like the orchestra is dueling as well.
So moving on, oh, wait, I did write that in my notes too. I love this triumphant but kind of naive single trumpet. Or wait, no, maybe that was something different. I don't really know. Who knows? But I liked it. So here we're back. We're about to enter the main forward bay again of the Death Star. And so let me pull that up. Nope.
Good luck.
Imperials.
They may be on level 5 and 6 now, sir.
Oh, I'm obsessed with that.
Where could they be?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wait, so much happening. Okay. I want to make sure that we hit the amazing space synthy sound, the vibraphone thingy with the flutes.
Yep.
And also I'm not sure why I have Rafe Vaughan Williams in my notes, but we'll see. And then truly the minor main theme.
Yeah. So much again. No, absolutely. You know, it's that return to, I guess, the Death Star sneaking music, warms up into, again, that kind of, the main theme. It is minor, you're totally right. But again, it's sort of the like, ooh, we might be getting somewhere here.
And it's for
energy
3PO, for 3PO's gloomy outlook.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because to me, listening to that on the soundtrack in isolation, I'm like, oh, this must be a shot of like Han coolly leaning against the wall. He's, ready to go. But it's 3PO going, oh, where can they be? I mean, again, probably a good example of another thing that Williams does in his scores, which is he plays the melodies of people you're thinking of, in that moment. 3PO is thinking of Luke, and so we hear Luke. In the same way that, in Under the Score, we have a long-running joke, which is that Marion's theme is not actually Marion's theme from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's thinking of Marion's theme, because it usually plays when she's not actually on screen. So I mean, that's kind of a good example of it here. But so much, and it is a lovely little performance on French horn as well. There's real life to that as well.
Yes.
I mean, it's the whole score by the LSO is just fantastic, but that French horn, there's such shape to the note.
That's true. Yeah. Interesting. I have to get a French horn player on here sometime. I will have next week an oboe player who was explaining because it's already recorded, but he was explaining how the LSO oboe player clearly plays with a different reed style than like Americans or something.
Really?
So that was really interesting to hear about the difference between reed playing and.
I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, I had no idea. But yeah. So spoiler, little sneak peek.
Yeah.
So before that, we have this this moment with the vibraphone and the flutes. It goes like, and there's like the pedal. That sounds so spacey to me. Like, I think it's such an interesting instrument choice there, and I love it. And it sounds out. I don't know. If I didn't know it were part of Star Wars, I would say that's probably, I don't know, some sort of a synthesizer doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a cool sound, and I mean, we'll go back to Bernard Herrmann and Williams, just because it really is. It keeps striking me as the most Herrmann-esque music that Williams has written. Well, certainly for Star Wars, except maybe the mystery music in Attack of the Clones. There's, I think, a decent chunk of Vertigo in that. But Herrmann was probably, as his number one skill, a master of orchestration and recording techniques as well. Like, in the 50s, he would combine bass flute with kettle drum, which like you would never be able to do, but you can in the 1950s, because you can use different microphones and, put them in different rooms and then splice them together in the recording studio. Whereas if you played that on stage, there's no way you would hear the bass flute over a kettle drum. That's just not possible. And so, he got so many amazing kind of otherworldly sounds over the course of his career, whether that's, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which pioneered electronic instruments, or Fahrenheit 451. So many of his films have these amazing moments of, wait, like, what was that sound? That's, even Citizen Kane, his first film, is just so otherworldly in spots. And I just can't help but feel that, this little section with Williams, like, he's been listening. Yeah, it's such a cool little sound.
Yeah, play one more time.
We think they may be splitting up. They may be on level 5 and 6 now, sir.
Now I know why I wrote Rafe Vaughan Williams. It's because that's not normally what I would think of a flute as sounding like. The vibes do give it that more of that space feel, but the flute, it sounds sort of, it's like the no vibrato version of violin here. It also sort of, it sounds like a slightly more tempered flute sound. And of course it's more like playing one note at a time, adding, one note at a time. And it reminds me of, I think about the orchestra, or I think about each instrument in the orchestra and the wide range of sounds that can come from each one. Like we think of the main tones of each instrument, but obviously there's so much more, like we established with violin, not even to talk about like all the different ways you can hit the string and use the bow and whatever. And with the flute here, it's like a very restrained sound. It reminds me of the way Rafe Vaughan Williams writes in that second orchestra in Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. So there's like one orchestra is like the main, it's a string orchestra piece. So there's the string orchestra, and then part of the string orchestra is siphoned off to be a quartet. So the quartet itself is used to have separate solos as a quartet solely. And then there's also additionally players pulled out of the main orchestra to form a second orchestra. And so the second orchestra is only supposed to play no vibrato, I think with maybe mutes on too, but it's completely no vibrato second orchestra, because it's situated in the back of the orchestra, and it's supposed to sound like an organ. And because of the way it is, because of the way that those parts are written, everything kind of moves. It's, if I remember correctly, it's like kind of homophonic, like move thing. I don't know. It's in it without any vibrato. It really comes off. It kind of does actually end up sounding like an organ, but it's strings not doing their primo tone. And here's another one of those sections where, like, if you know how to use the instruments in all these interesting ways that you don't normally hear, then you can achieve wild sounds like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. The Vaughan Williams does sound like an organ. I've often thought that. And you raise a really good point that I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to ask you. Do you think that there are mutes on the strings in any of these sort of creeping sections? Because I wondered about that.
I don't think so. It doesn't. Okay. Hello, Anakin. I don't. It's possible, but if mutes on a violin really dampen the resonance, and I think even on those like pianissimo sections where the strings are doing the Hitchcock sustain stuff, it sounded like there was too much high end in the like harmonics in the overtones for me to think that there were mutes on, and I think mutes would take away some of the. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's a great answer.
I certainly think brass are muted.
Yeah,
in many times.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me one of the other things that I was going to say about those, the way that he builds up the chord with individual notes entering on top of each other. Mm-hmm. That I think is another really interesting hallmark of the first film. In the in the trench run sequence, we get muted brass where they kind of go da na 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 da na 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 na, but each of those individual notes are played individually and sustained. So the first trumpet is going like da, the second trumpet is going
yeah, it is a very specific effect. I mean, it's like hello or hello, hello. It's like when people try to do the barbershop quartet thing. You're right. You're right. It's something about sustaining it while letting the next thing come on. It makes the music shift in a different way. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. Good stuff.
Cool.
So now we're nearing the end of the minutes, and right after we hear the Force theme.
Where could they be?
Flute and oboe.
Close the blast doors.
Now some more Imperials.
Open the blast door.
Breathing and timpani. And then that fluty thing again. And that's the end. That's the end of those
Wow.
minutes.
That little the little rhythm that you get of Han being chased by the stormtroopers is so like groovy. Like dun 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 dun, dun. Like yeah. I kind of feel like John Williams is emphasizing the rhythm a little bit for slightly comedic effect. Like it sounds, it sounds like a chase, but it sounds like a chase that is like under control, right?
I think the xylophone does it for me too. It's like
yeah. It's such a fun little thing, and for him to just kind of throw that in, we don't really hear that rhythm. I don't think in that section anyway. And then the timpani is just great. I love the isolated timpani to sort of suggest the coming showdown. It's really cool and old-fashioned. And something about, like the way the LSO is recorded, the first Star Wars score, I think, has quite a different sound to the others in terms of audio quality. And it sounds like a symphony recording rather than a soundtrack recording, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And just like that, the kind of dullness of the timpani, but it's so kind of electric in its dullness. I'm doing a terrible job describing it, but I really love that moment. And I also have got to say that me and Andrew, who's another co-host of The Art of the Score, when we were doing this section, we both misremembered that this section surely featured like a timpani. I don't know what you'd call it, like a slur, like a lift from one note to another. You know how timpanis can do. No, like you know how they do like you can lift the pitch, and it's not there, but both of us
right.
was.
Did you think the pitch was going down or up?
Up, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is
you mean
just,
like when it's being tuned, or do you mean like just okay? Huh.
Yeah. So timpanis have like a foot pedal where you can change the pitch. You can set it between two pitches, and usually timpanists will do that so that they can get more notes out of fewer drums. They're very large. You don't want to have 12 set up in front of you, but sometimes what you can do is play a roll like a brrr, and hit the pedal so it goes like that. And I really, for the life of me, thought that that's what they were doing, but
like right at the end.
Yeah.
Now that you say that, I'm like, they don't do that.
Close the blast doors.
Open the blast door.
It's like here. Oh, I guess it's just a crescendo.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just rare in a film score that you hear isolated timpani. I mean, these days you hear all sorts of drums, but timpani
is very orchestral.
Yeah. It's got this real old world sound to it, I think, kind of stateliness. It's not quite so aggressive. Sort of feels like you're about to hear some Beethoven or something, Yeah.
And it often marks the transition between scenes in Star Wars, or especially especially if we're about to get to Vader or something like that. Yeah.
That's true, actually. When we were talking about the sound of the Force, I don't think it's a musical instrument. I think maybe it's just a sound effect. But when he's force choking Motti earlier in the film, I think there's like a sort of deep.
Yeah, I think that is sound design.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, definitely. I feel like the timpani kind of recalls that a little bit. I don't know whether that sound design was in there when Williams saw the film for the first time, or whether that's just coincidence. But I don't know. It feels right. Like he is Vader.
It feels so right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dan.
Yeah.
We've neared the end of our minutes. Just to recap, the themes that are present in this set of minutes are the main theme, A section and B section. We have a bunch of Imperial motifs. We have the ostinato, which is the I think that's what I'm thinking of. We have the melody motif, and then we have the Imperial troops ostinato, which is something else, and Leia's theme very briefly and very quickly. And if you're following along on the soundtrack, you will hear this music on the tractor beam / chasm crossfire. And by the way, I think chasm crossfire was recorded on day one of these I think it was the first thing they recorded before the main title, even on day one.
Wow.
And then also Rescue of the Princess, which is a very similar track, but on a different version of the soundtrack of the many versions there are.
Huh. What a cool way to kick things off for the orchestra.
I know. But it makes, I don't know if John Williams works the same way now as he did in the 70s, but the people that I know who did the sequel scores, or players who've played on the sequel scores, will say that recording sessions, they'll start with, like, he likes to get the orchestra in tune with each other, kind of to get to know not to get to know each other necessarily, but get comfortable with playing as an ensemble. And so I don't know, maybe these were good warm-up tracks. Who knows? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if you can warm up with that, like you can play.
That's the start with that, so then you can kick anyone out.
Yeah.
So are you ready to move on to the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Question 1 is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Yeah, I thought about this because I wanted to have a good answer. I think, mythic orchestral memory, I think is what I decided on, because you got to have, it's orchestral clearly, and it's memory because it's designed to be a throwback, but it's also made it mythologized. It's bigger than it ever was, that memory.
It's thinking about the Star Wars theme.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. Number 2, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you're interested in or want to learn more about?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot because
I'm asking the person who wrote a Star Wars book.
Yeah, no, I've spent a lot of my professional life thinking about Star Wars music. But actually what I would like to know, and this is more like a future question, I suppose, but like the way Star Wars is going at the moment is it's trying out a whole bunch of new sounds. Even like John Powell's music for Solo, which is pretty close in spirit to Williams, I think is still trying out a bunch of new things. And so I guess especially with, Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, I'd like to know, will we return to this kind of orchestral sounds for Star Wars in the future? And how will we get there? Because, it takes a very specific set of talents to make this kind of music.
And commitments and money.
Yeah. I would obviously love that. And I'm not saying that Star Wars always has to sound like this. I think it's great to try new things. But that's a genuine question that I have, is will Star Wars ever be able to return to this sound in that same way?
Yeah, That's it's definitely a big question.
Yeah.
And question number 3, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
Well,
Oh, I feel like this is a mean question for you.
yeah. I mean, soundtracks is my life. I have interests in so many different things, but I think probably, given that I've spent half this podcast talking about the similarities between Williams and Herman, which is not that common. I don't think they share that many similarities in general. But I think I have to pick a Herman score. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll just go Vertigo. Why not? What a great soundtrack. Yeah.
Solid choice.
Yeah. Not too many who would disagree with that, probably.
Well, you've made me want to watch Vertigo again now.
It's great. It's really great. Yeah. And actually what I was saying before, in Attack of the Clones, the da 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 da. I'm sure there's some Vertigo those undulating mysterious strings. Yeah,
Which have returned in some of the Star Wars TV shows.
Yeah, true. Very true. Yeah, great little cue. It's one of the eternal disappointments with the I was going to say Across the Scars, Attack of the Clones original soundtrack releases. I don't think it's got that melody on it. It's only an expanded.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the music that when we see Camino.
Yeah.
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 I didn't know that.
We hear quite a bit for Jango Fett and the whole escape battle sequence. I don't know that we hear that in the original release. I only say this because I recently made an hour-long sort of kind of radio documentary about Star Wars music, and I had to really go hunting to find that because I really wanted to include it.
Oh. Well, I'll have to have you back for Attack of the Clones when I get there.
Yeah.
Or future Star Wars movies if you are up for it.
Yeah, this has been incredibly fun. Obviously, I've probably blown out your average episode length. I'm very sorry for that.
Very worth it. Where can people find you, Dan?
Good question. They can find me on Twitter at Dan Golding. I have a website which I try and moderately keep up to date with my stuff at dangolding.com. But if you're in Australia, I do radio on ABC Classic. If you're not in Australia, then I don't know. Yeah, Art of the Score is probably where I live. Though we're a little slow with releases at the moment.
Okay, there's a lot to catch up on if you're new to the podcast. There's a lot of scores to catch up on, and I highly recommend the show. Also, Dan has a YouTube channel.
I do.
Dan Golding video essays.
It's true. I've not added to that in a little while. I probably should do a video essay.
And
they're
book,
a lot of fun. Yeah,
which I have started reading, and I think this is one that I think a lot of listeners. I think you'll enjoy this. It's not specifically music focused.
No,
it's called Star Wars After Lucas.
There's a chapter in there on the music to particularly The Force Awakens, but yeah, it's mostly just generally about how Star Wars was revived. I still think that's such a fascinating thing that a lot of people overlook, that when Disney bought Lucasfilm, the general reaction was, oh no, this can't ever possibly work, it'll be worse than the prequels. And look, for all the debate that's come and gone since, I think it didn't quite turn out the way that anybody expected. So interesting.
Yeah, highly recommend. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's been really awesome to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should say, I have to end the show. What am I doing? Oh, listeners, thank you so much for listening. You can find Star Wars Music Minute on YouTube if you're listening to this via podcast, and then vice versa if you prefer to listen to it in podcast form. You can just look for Star Wars Music Minute on all of the platforms. And also, I am on social media, Star Wars Musemin on Twitter or Star Wars Music Minute on TikTok. And next week, we'll be getting into minutes 96. Oops, no, what am I talking about? 91 through 95. We'll be getting to the glorious number 94 next week, and it'll feature Ben Kenobi's final moments. So, yes. All right. That's all I have for today. May the Force be with you.